Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. I'm serious. October 10th, 2016. Daily Coast Radio is live now, as Bill in Portland, Maine reminds us. You got to tune in today because Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, doesn't realize he's on a hot mic. If only, if only this mic actually turned on that easily. Of course, most days I'm trying to get on a hot mic and I have to press the button 3 or 4 times. Not a good sign, really. It's interesting that it's Columbus Day, as it turns out. It's also, well, it's Thanksgiving Day in Canada. Happy Thanksgiving, Canadians. Good morning. What time is it in Canada? It's the same time as it is here, for the most part. Okay. Just kidding. We know all about you. We've been studying. We figured out who your prime minister is, for once. Okay. Well, anyway, the focus really today, likely to be on the United States of America, as is usually the case on this program. I originally, at the end of last week, didn't even think we would get a live show in today. The kids are home. I've got no idea why we're off for Columbus Day. I don't think that's usually something we do, but I don't know. Probably, if you look back at the tapes of last year and the year before, I'm probably saying the same thing. I don't know why we're off for Columbus Day. We're never off for Columbus Day. Maybe we're always off for Columbus Day, and maybe I just don't realize it because I find it so surprising that we're off for Columbus Day and not off for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or anything like that. Like there's, well, you know, it's not as big a Jewish population here in this area as it was in New Jersey where I was growing up. However, there are lots and lots of kids in the school who are Italian explorers. So it's a good idea to be home today. Again, I don't know what's happening with it, but we'll take it. A day off is always good, and I thought maybe that perhaps my wife's work would be closed for the day, although I don't know what I was thinking. Increasingly, private workplaces not taking Columbus Day off, which not a bad idea really, but a day off is always good, but never mind. Do we really need to even get into the controversy of Christopher Columbus? No, we don't, because there's plenty of controversy to go around today. There was a debate last night. I did watch it. Right before airtime, I got a weird feeling that it might be my last chance. And in fact, I did see last night, Tegan Goddard from Political Wire and also Chuck Todd, as it turns out. Chuck Todd I don't follow, but I follow enough people who follow him that I have a pretty good idea of what he has to say during the day. Tegan Goddard I do. And both of them, in their own way, asked, does anybody think that there's a possibility that this is the last debate tonight, that it gets so rancorous that no third debate even becomes possible? And it got me a little shaken. That, and of course, the pre-debate press conference that they put together with the Clinton accusers, I just thought that was pretty instantly obvious as a flop, but it just made me think they might try to pull a stunt that will make a third debate pointless. You know, that it'll be the kind of thing that, like, well, this was such a playground fight that we're not even going to bother. But it also started to raise the possibility that this was not only the last debate, but that, I mean, I don't know, I started to get worried, like, this might signal maybe the end of the election. Like, all right, this is it. They're going to try and stage some kind of insane, as I said last night, like the political equivalent of that Las Vegas cop shooting where they walked in and shot 2 cops eating pizza at a lunch place and declared, this is a revolution. And they went to Walmart and got in a gun battle and shot themselves in the end. And I got the feeling that they were going to try to pull some kind of crazy ass stunt, and it might work, it might not, but it might just show, you know what, forget it. And I didn't think it was going to end in necessarily in alt-right revolution. I thought it might be, well, something happened and we had to arrest, Steve Bannon and a bunch of other people, and now we don't know what to do about going on with an election or having a debate or anything like that. And as it turns out, we didn't see anything like that, and the debate went okay. I mean, it kept the veneer of a debate. I don't think anybody would have thought afterwards that it was impossible to go forward with a third. But I guess we didn't know at the time how close we came to having some weird craziness happen. We got a hint of it. There was the pre-debate press conference with, I don't know if I can even name them all, Paula Jones. It was the Clinton accusers. Paula Jones, Catherine Willey, I think, and Juanita Broderick. And there was a fourth woman who I didn't know, and I guess this was supposed to be like the additional introduction. And Trump talked about her last night and he didn't even fully explain the situation. Actually, talking to my dad afterwards, or prior to the debate, and about the press conference, I figured out finally who she is. And I guess she was someone who was the victim of a rape as a 12-year-old. And I gather that what happened was Hillary Clinton defended the man accused of perpetrating it and won, and so therefore she hates women and rape victims in particular. But they had this crazy press conference, and hardly anybody knew about it because it was on Facebook Live, I think, was the only people who covered this thing. And it was his own Facebook Live page. And then they brought them to the debate, and now this morning we read Robert Costa finds out that Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani planned to have these four accusers sit in Trump's family seating box, which I guess would have put them right next to Bill Clinton, and to have a live on-the-air, face-to-face confrontation between them, and I guess then declare the revolution open. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen because the chairman of the debate commission, Frank Fahrenkopf, who used to be RNC chairman, said, no, we're not going to allow that, which is funny in its own right, but then put together with, the Trump bravado, plus the Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani thing, like the fearless warriors of the alt-right were going to declare a revolution at this thing, and not only that, but Donald Trump, when he gets elected, is going to sneak ninjas into Syria and kill all the ISIS. And they couldn't get four women good seats at a political event. That's it. This, like I said this morning, it's like toddlers stacked in a trench coat. They're inept. They choked. That's one of his favorite jibes. Trump always accusing people of choking. They brought all these people there, and they did nothing with them. And now also I find out, by the way, there's some controversy about how did they get there? Who paid for them? Trump said, we did. Right? The campaign paid for it. And the women asked individually said, one right-wing organization did it. One of them said Breitbart paid for me to come here. One of them said the consulting company owned by the Rage Furby guy who crapped on the floor when he was in college, Charles C. Johnson, said they paid for one of them. How would you like to have paid for that and get them there? And this is what you get out of it. Paula Jones, she's here tonight. That's it. That's the whole. They must have been the deplorables must have been howling at their TVs last night. When are you going to do something with these? He just sat them there and oh my God. So for all this posturing and huffing and puffing, and there was a lot of huffing in the microphone last night. 0, 0, 0 payoff. I've never seen a political stunt flop harder, and he's lucky nobody knew he had any idea. Nobody knew he had any plan whatsoever. Again, a simple thing, and we're going to declare war. That was another thing. Giuliani by the morning was saying, we're going to declare war on the establishment. That was what their reaction to the tapes. We're going to war with the establishment. Frank Fahrenkopf says no. Oh, I guess the war is over. This sucks. These guys are inept idiots. And P.S. there was also a debate last night. Oh, and also disgusting tapes over the weekend. I almost forgot about that one. Hi, Greg.
Hey, how are you?
Did you see the debate?
I did.
Why? Yeah, I saw it too. I had to watch in case it was the last debate in American history.
Right. So what else you want to talk about?
I don't know.
So, a bunch of stuff happened over the weekend. Let me just point out a few things. Yeah, there was a debate. If you want to do the traditional judges sit down and score, the LA Times did that. They had 3 judges, Helen Decker, David Lauder, and Doyle McManus, all experienced political reporters. 3 of them give the win to Clinton. And then you have the snap polls. There was 57-34 with the CNN snap poll, which was funny only because Wolf Blitzer introduced it to Kellyanne Conway as it came in to watch her face. And he said, "So what do you think of that?" She said, "I must have been watching a different debate."
Oh, I guarantee you were.
And was it you? Somebody on Twitter said, "You must have been watching a different election."
Yeah, I guess. You were a different planet.
Yeah.
It wasn't me, but...
we have YouGov, post-debate poll, Clinton 47, Trump 42. Clinton narrowly won undecideds 44-41. She was also considered more presidential by 57-31. With a gender gap, women thought Clinton won by 50-38. Who are these 38? While men thought Trump won by 46-43. 71% said Trump interrupted more, as if that matters, compared to 7% who thought Clinton interrupted more. Now, that's a factual test because she only interrupted once. But I think that the more important thing is, unlike the vice presidential debate, with the VP debate, I had my own point of view. As you know, I thought that Kaine strategically lost the debate on purpose in terms of style points.
Yeah.
And won it in terms of sticking a stiletto in the ribs of Mike Pence, who was forced on the sidelines for the weekend because Tim Kaine pointed out quite rightly that Pence was trying to defend the indefensible. Then these tapes come out, and Pence doesn't know what to do, and he's apoplectic about it because it destroys his image. Let's assume for the moment he actually cares what Trump said. Most evangelicals don't. They're just in it for the power. But let's assume that Mike Pence is a moral guy and doesn't like what happened, so he sat out the weekend. And then with the strong Donald Trump debate performance, meaning he hovered behind Hillary and sounded like Darth Vader in her ear, he decided that he's back on the trail with him this morning. See, the point of all of this is that what happened at the debate is Trump did well enough so that he doesn't have to be pressured to drop out, but not so well that it helps his electoral position any. And that's as far as he goes. How bad is his electoral position? Let's just say that the Rasmussen poll, normally a Republican-leaning poll, as you know, had Trump up 5 points just last week. Last one they did was tied. Today, Clinton's up by 7. 7. And that's because of the tapes that came out over the weekend.
Yeah.
When Todd Aiken did his thing with Claire McCaskill back in the day, it took several weeks for it to filter down and make a difference, and then the undecideds finally broke against him, and she did quite well. So expecting that the snap poll that was done, I think a couple were done, Morning Consult for Politico and YouGov, found that a lot of people didn't like it, but it didn't really change positions by more than a point or two. Of course, he was already losing. Those are not going to be the definitive answer. A lot of people hadn't even seen the tapes yet. They filter. You get to talk about it at the water cooler, which is really going to be interesting, bizarre water cooler conversation, given what's allowed to be talked about in the office and what's not. Mm-hmm. And eventually it sneaks into the conversation and seeps in to people's opinions, and then finally you can look at polling and see where that's at. So you have all of that, and then you have the debate last night, and basically Trump, as you started to talk about with the pre-debate stuff, Trump was trying to intimidate Clinton and at the same time change the topic. And he didn't succeed in the first, and he partially succeeded in the second for a day.
Yeah.
And then we get back to the fact that we have these tapes sitting out there that Trump has to be responsible for, and that part isn't going away. The funny part, though, is that the Bannon faction of the party thinks that this was a great success.
Oh, well, sure.
And It's not.
No.
You know, that you scratch your head. Chuck Todd was saying this morning, for some reason, they really think that this helped them.
Yeah.
But how does it? I have a quick tweet storm here, very quick one. There were a couple of good ones yesterday that I saved, but this one happens to be from John Harwood talking about this with pollster Stan Greenberg.
Okay.
So it starts out, who won the debate? CNN ORC, 57 Clinton, 34 Trump. YouGov poll, 47 Clinton, 42 Trump. Democratic pollster Stan Greenberg on the debate. This is a disaster for the Republican Party. It reinforces every trend pushing Hillary toward double digits. And as I cite you these tweets, think of Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Okay. Remember why Gingrich had to resign as Speaker last time somebody tried to run nationally on Bill Clinton? This consolidates Trump voters, 2/3 of the Republicans. Republicans like Ryan stay in place since they're punished for defecting.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, Trump was menacing and ugly, will push away college-educated women, minority voters. This is a 38% strategy.
Yeah.
38% strategy. That's worse than George McGovern did.
Well, it's that was part of the weekend talk before the tapes. He's positioned to be historically the worst performer in presidential election history.
Yeah, could be. Megan McArdle, who is, I think, a libertarian/independent.
I thought you said make him a cardinal. There, I was like, well, okay.
Right, columnist for Bloomberg View.
Yeah.
Ex-Newsweek, ex-Atlantic, ex-The Economist. Who knows? Anyway, has a slightly longer one, but goes like this. Hang on a second.
A little bit like that. We need to have a Donald Trump dog comment. He tried to get on the radio like a dog. All right.
Well, part of the problem is that on my little quiet street, sometimes cars go by, and if they don't ask permission of the dog, Abby just likes to give her opinion.
Yeah,
so the electoral strategy of Trump supporters has always been more coherent if you imagine him running for dictator.
Yes.
This is, in fact, how a lot of people treat politics, she says. The only thing that matters is getting the White House. The much reviled Washington understands that doing anything requires a multi-pronged strategy to take White House and Congress at the same time. Trump supporters are now saying, unite with us to defeat Clinton or we'll take away those symbolic lower offices only insiders care about. That's what they are saying to Republican office holders. Washington insiders understand that, one, Clinton can't be defeated because they nominated somebody unelectable, and two, supporting Trump at this point will cost them swing seats, which will only make Clinton's victory bigger and enhance her power. I think a lot of Trump supporters are starting to see that Trump is toast, but they don't get that Trump costs them congressional seats or that the congressional seats matter, apart from something you can use as a bargaining chip to punish Washington, because they're only looking at the Oval Office. So they're demanding a very, very costly show of loyalty from the GOP leadership, a show of loyalty which will only make sure that everything they are nominally opposed to actually happens. Now, this is an alternative theory. U.S. politics are so toxic, almost nobody has any affirmative goals. The only point is to cause opponents pain and humiliation. I prefer the theory which suggests error rather than doom, but the second may be more plausible. Now, after watching that pre-debate horror show, along with the post-debate spin on the part of the Trump camp, which declares victory, it's hard to know which of those two theories really operates. But there's no question that the focus is on Clinton, and it's been made to be on Clinton. And for some reason, the primal scream from the Trump Republican base that they would rather lose the White House as long as they get to say bad things about Bill Clinton and finally get out of their system what they've been trying to say for 30 years, is just a bizarre show to watch.
It really was kind of strange. And I think having the note from Costa this morning that they were trying to engineer this confrontation adds some more to it. I mean, I don't know how you make that the centerpiece of the night, fail to pull it off, and then say, but it was a huge win. I mean, not that, well, that's central to nothing. They couldn't have won the debate, and at best, they would have pulled that off, had a major disruption, lost the debate, and then said we won. So,
yeah, but while losing voters,
yeah.
I mean, that's the part that, you know.
So actually, maybe that's it.
The only thing it does.
It's a win because we were foiled.
Yeah, the only thing it does is it allows them to change the subject from these tapes, as if there's not going to be more discussion about it, and as if not more people are going to come out. But anyway, this is from the Weekly Standard. We'll have to see how that plays out over the week in terms of the tapes and stuff. I do know that some guy I never heard of that turns out to be a Bush cousin, Billy Bush, is now off the Today Show, which I didn't even know he was on.
Yeah, I didn't know he was on
who
the
he
Today
was.
Show.
But that's the first casualty, and ultimately that's what's going to happen to Trump, too. It's just going to take a month.
I remember Billy Bush because he was...
Doesn't he have a beer?
No, it's the other one. But Billy Carter had a beer, and Bush has
Billy
a beer
beer
with a C in it. But I don't know. Anyway, I remember Billy Bush. He has come up in the context of this election, old tape with Donald Trump before. And I don't know if we played the tape, but I'm pretty sure we talked about it. Billy Bush, when he was working for, again, same thing, Access Hollywood, in 2004, the year before these tapes were made, which was, if I understand correctly, the context of these tapes was he had been on, like, the soap opera Days of Our Lives, or one of the soap operas, and was going with Access Hollywood to the studio where they filmed Days of Our Lives to shoot behind-the-scenes video of him so that when Access Hollywood ran the feature that said, hey, he was on Days of Our Lives and we were with him before and after the filming, they would have footage. That's what this whole thing was about. Who cares? He was on Days of Our Lives. Big whoop. But Access Hollywood, they got to do something. The year before, 2004, Billy Bush had done a feature tagging along with Donald Trump on Election Day to go vote with him. And the underplayed story of that one was that Trump had no idea whatsoever where his voting precinct was, and in fact, with the camera crew along, went to 3 different precincts in the area and couldn't find the one that had his name on the books. And he eventually, I think, in frustration, gives up and casts a provisional ballot at the 3rd precinct he tries, which, by the way, is documented evidence of voter fraud on tape, but unless that was actually his precinct, or it's what Republicans would point to and say it was voter fraud if it was a Democrat casting a vote.
Well, that's better than his kids who couldn't vote at all since they weren't registered.
They weren't, and I believe that might have been the case, that maybe he wasn't registered either, or at least had registered somewhere he couldn't remember. Maybe he registered in Florida, for all I know, like as campaign manager.
Well, there is a situation, I mean, certainly this happens in Connecticut, I suspect it happens in other states, that if you're registered but then you really haven't voted in like 20 years and then you go try to vote, you're not on the books. Right.
He may have been purged from the books, but it was interesting. He had no idea which precinct was his. And in New York and Manhattan, they are pretty close together, so it's a crapshoot. But, of course, he's limoing from one to another. And, eventually he still can't figure it out. Ends up casting a provisional ballot, and still has zero empathy for anybody else who's trying to get ID or having to cast a provisional ballot. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And so Billy Bush has been the biggest liability to this guy all year. And
so Billy Bush is involved with this tape because that's the one that Trump is talking to on the bus.
Yes.
And in that same scenario, going on to some kind of a soap opera. And so Trump is running for president, gets to be a big deal when it breaks Friday night, and it took until last night for the feedback to hit Billy Bush. He's now suspended from the Today Show, so he's the first one to go down. But the fact that he wasn't immediately suspended by NBC, and the fact that this whole discussion about why was NBC News sitting on the tape because the lawyers had to go over it carefully is actually a lot of BS. You know, the fact is that network NBC is under a tremendous amount of scrutiny because they had a fiduciary relationship with Trump. They've obviously been trying to protect him. Their integrity is down the tubes, along with Billy Bush's. Yeah. And the fact that Billy Bush wasn't immediately suspended on the spot is arguably a combination of a great example of white privilege as well as a great example of rape culture and how it is justified and defended by the good old boys who run the place.
Yeah. That was, I mean, the fact that they spent the weekend saying, well, the locker room talk.
Nothing. Well, first they said nothing is going to happen. They actually had a statement that nothing's going to happen to him.
Oh, with Billy Bush in particular, yes.
Right. And then I think they put that up on Facebook, and they just got so much negative response, mostly from women, that they, and by the way, the Today Show's audience is mostly women, and so guess what?
Yeah,
and when people vote, it's going to be mostly women, and we know it's going to happen.
Well, I guess I'm glad they did. I just don't care about what's happening on the Today Show. But I mean, but you're right.
Exactly. But that's why in the bigger context it's important. So anyway, this is a piece from the Weekly Standard. I just don't want to lose track of that's really what happened. The debate is really a sideshow. So the debate's biggest loser was the GOP, says the Weekly Standard.
Oh,
Jonathan V. Last writing here. First couple of paragraphs I think are important because that's where I want to end the segment. There is one important sense in which Donald Trump won the debate. That's scare quotes around one. The debate on Sunday night. He didn't implode. He wasn't good, again, scare quotes, or attractive or knowledgeable. He was coarse and whiny and unpleasant, which, by the way, he was. He lied constantly, and he became the first presidential candidate in the history of our republic to promise that if elected, he would attempt to have his opponent face criminal prosecution. That really is the key. That to me is the astounding thing that came out of that yesterday.
True.
Yes, he admitted he didn't pay his taxes. People already decided they care or they don't care, whatever. But he's the first presidential candidate in history to promise that if he wins, Hillary Clinton's going to jail.
Yes. Well, he won't be able to deliver on that.
Further than that, he said Clinton, if he's president, he'd be in jail, right? Not just criminal prosecution, but he would be the law.
Yes. I would direct
should
my
terrify
Attorney
you,
General.
says the Weekly Standard, and should be disqualifying all on its own. By the way, it is. But Trump didn't have a psychotic break on stage, and clearing that bar might be enough to keep Mike Pence, Paul Ryan, and Reince Priebus from publicly disavowing his candidacy this week. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what a win looks like for Trump these days.
Yeah.
We stand at a moment in history, says Weekly. Athwart history, they should have said, where dozens of Republican representatives, senators, and governors have not only publicly vowed not to vote for the Republican nominee, but have called on him to vacate the nomination. We are 4 weeks before Election Day. 1 in 4 Republican voters want the nominee to drop out of the race, and that number is almost certain to rise over the next week. This is unprecedented and catastrophic. Before the grab them by the genitals, Trump was already down by 5 points with only 4 weeks to go. He was behind in Florida, North Carolina. His deficit in Pennsylvania was double digits, nearly double digits. And I think it actually was double digits yesterday. So the question going into the St. Louis debate was, can Trump turn the race around? He cannot. The question was, can Trump perform well enough to avoid being forced out before Election Day? And the 3 men with the power to force Trump's hand are Pence, Ryan, and Priebus. And while none of them are foolish enough to think that Trump has a chance to be president, they may decide after tonight that pushing the self-destruct button on the party's presidential campaign is too risky, that it's better to ride out the storm, which means it wasn't really a winner. The Weekly Standard, by the way, thought Clinton was terrible. Trump was marginally worse, but the big loser was the Republican Party, because the worst-case scenario for November 9th is not that Hillary Clinton wins again. That cake is baked. It's that if the party doesn't cut Trump loose, the Democrats take over the Senate and carry the House.
That would be great.
And that's what they're worried about, and they should be worried. And in fact, that's what the Wall Street Journal is worried about, and they say the same thing. Will a better debate performance stop GOP defections? Skip to the bottom here. At some point, Republicans running for the House and Senate may have to mobilize voters with an argument that they need them as a check on Hillary Clinton. Her domestic agenda is to the left of Obama's, and a Nancy Pelosi House would implement it. The next week will decide whether they need to pull that emergency lever. Again, think of Kelly Ayotte. You're running in New Hampshire. You need the Trump voters to win. You need the moderates to win because the Trump voters aren't enough. Now you're in the situation of she's already said that she's not voting for him, and she's got the Trump voters ticked off. How does she turn around a 5th time and say that, okay, well, I know that I said that he's terrible and I disavow him, but I'm voting for him again because he had a good debate, and then you lose the moderates. I mean, there's nothing you could do to save your candidacy up there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other Republican senators who are like that. The last poll out of Florida showed Marco Rubio with a 2-point lead, just a 2-point lead. And if things get worse in Florida, that tide may lift all boats. So yeah, we have this huge problem which Jamel Boyd points out in Slate, the real problem here, by threatening to jail his opponent, Donald Trump promised to rip up the foundations of liberal democracy. That's kind of a problem. But there's this electoral problem here where Trump is tanking, and his ability to stay on the ticket only makes things worse. That's the result of the debate last night. And so when you hear people like Morning Joe or Morning Mika, which I didn't hear but I'm learning about by Twitter, proclaim he was masterful and he just did great in the debate yesterday, I'm sure Scott Adams will say the same thing. I will just respectfully point out they really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, not too much. It was a hell of a thing. And, I guess he's really lucky. As disastrous as the debate turned out to be, he's actually lucky that it was scheduled, because otherwise it would have been another 24 hours nonstop on the tapes, which I guess we get to next and make it that just the same. But, yeah, I don't even know. I assume, by the way, as far as the emergency brake lever goes for congressional races, I would imagine they pulled that this weekend, and that they are already implementing plans rolled out over the weekend. Yeah, we gotta sell ourselves as a firewall against Clinton. I don't know what else they could possibly be thinking. It would be a great thing, I think just the odds are still against it. Although I guess there's actual odds out there, and they say the opposite. I know it's going to be terribly disappointing if after all of this, there are still millions of people out there that say, well, Republicans can govern just fine. And this is where it's been a controversial thing to separate Trump from mainstream Republicans all along. And there's been a lot of criticism from the congressional level races of
Not
the
this
presidential.
Week.
But, yeah.
All that criticism has gone away.
Yeah. But that's been a complaint earlier that, don't give them space between the bulk of the party and Trump, tie everybody to Trump, because it is entirely possible that people say, well, forget the presidential and come out heavily for the congressional races. And there'll be a lot of people who will be pretty severely turned off to politics again if you end up once again with just, the same roadblocks, the same gridlock, nothing happening, et cetera. We can't seem to get anything done, and I won't take home the lesson of,
right,
we did great when it was all Democrats, actually.
Yes. I just have to point out Megan McArdle is absolutely right. This whole thing about only the White House not paying attention to Congress is wrong. I also have to point out there's this constant dynamic between the House and the president whenever there's a presidential election. Go back to Howard Dean's controversial 50-state strategy. Which the presidential candidates thought was a waste of time and money because all that money should go to help elect the president.
Yeah.
And, of course, Congress said, no, how about us? We think it is important to do because, we want to be elected too. And so there's always that dynamic. And actually, it turns out that the early criticism about the way that Clinton's campaign had basically focused on trying to discredit Trump from being qualified turns out to be working remarkably well. Part of her strategy was to say, listen, I understand that all Republicans aren't awful, only the ones that support Trump. And that got the congressional people upset because they want to make the case that all Republicans are terrible because otherwise how are they going to vote for us? Well, have a strong campaign just like Jason Kander does in Missouri. And that's how you win. So it turns out that Trump is so bad and so deplorable that a lot of the criticism is now muted because people like Kelly Ayotte, I'm using as an example, are caught in the crosshairs, metaphorically speaking, of a Trump nuclear strike. And it turns out that it's actually going to hurt Congress as well as hurt the GOP candidate for president. And so for Democrats, that literally might be a win-win.
I wouldn't mind taking it. I hope it comes around.
So a lot of Republican strategists are already writing off the Senate. And the question is going to be what happens to the House. And again, it's too early. It was only Friday. Today's Monday. It's way too early. You need another week or so to really see how all of this plays out. But I just don't see the Trump campaign being, let's say, in a strong position. Too many Republicans are already writing them off, doing things like pulling their staff, who are the get-out-the-vote people in the states.
That's true.
And he didn't have much of a get out the vote staff anyway, and if those people are polled, he's got nothing. So just to reiterate, even before a lot of this stuff happened, let's just review some recent polls that came out over the weekend. We have, again, Rasmussen today, Clinton +7. The LA Times still has Trump +3, so that's our funny poll. Trump versus Clinton in NBC News head-to-head, Clinton +7. That's NBC News Survey Monkey, came out a day early. Yesterday, we had Trump versus Clinton +5 in Economist YouGov. And in individual state polls, and this is important, Ohio, CBS News YouGov, Clinton +4. Wisconsin, CBS YouGov, Clinton +4. There's another Wisconsin poll this week coming out from Charles Franklin and the MU Law Poll. I expect that Wednesday or so. Iowa, Des Moines Register had Trump +4. This is pre-tape. Wow. All of this stuff is pre-tape. Florida, okay. NBC Wall Street Journal Marist, Clinton +3. Pennsylvania, NBC Wall Street Journal Marist, Clinton +12. If you're looking at stuff like that, CBS News YouGov, Pennsylvania, Clinton +8. So Pennsylvania is solid. Florida is a lead. Iowa is close, but Trump's still in the lead. That'd be the one state I think that Clinton might not win. That's considered a swing state, but after the tapes we'll have to see. And Ohio swinging toward Clinton. In fact, there's record of the GOP chair of Ohio with his wife watching the debate last night and considering himself undecided voter.
Huh. Was that just to get on Frank Luntz's...
I don't think so. In fact, he was quoted, he was asked, how do you think Trump did? And he said, Trump did so bad he made my dog throw up.
Wow, I like this guy.
This is the Ohio GOP guy. He's actually considered to be one of the leading candidates to replace Reince Priebus.
Huh. Was Ohio the state where they had to chuck the woman off the Trump campaign chair? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's happening in so many places. I can't remember anymore.
It's happened so often, but it could be. Anyway, that just gives you an idea of where things stand. So my point is that she was losing Saturday. That was just the Sunday polls. Saturday polls, Virginia, Clinton +12. Colorado. Did we have a Colorado poll? No, that was just, it was a tie. Gravis.
+1 billion. Okay.
The point there is that she was already leading to the point where you couldn't see where Trump had a path to victory. Then the tape happened.
Yeah.
All right, let's not lose sight of that. So then the debate happens, and he didn't
kill her.
Physically attack her. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that happened in his favor. Oh, well, he won.
Yeah.
He won in the eyes of the 38% in the sense that now you can't throw him off the ticket. But the bigger picture is the guy's losing. He's losing badly. Now we can't even throw him off because his base won't allow us. And what do we do now? Congratulations. You want to call that a win? You go right ahead.
I do.
Yeah, just breathe hard into the microphone. So I'll leave you with that because that's basically the big overview, and then we'll see how all of this stuff settles out as we go forward.
All right. I will have to take it. I mean, this was really insane, and I guess given how I felt just prior to the debate, I guess I'm glad we are, on the air. There's not, missile trails in the sky. Nothing has happened. No coup that I'm aware of. So I guess that's good. And I consider that a win at this point.
Yeah, you can get annoyed and frustrated with people like Joe Scarborough, but
Easy.
Trump is not winning this election.
No. I opened up the Daily Kos front page just to check on the forecasts.
Yes, tell us what it is.
Presidential forecast is 94%. I don't believe I've seen anything quite like that.
Right, and that just is up from 72% 5 days ago.
Yeah.
With those polls that I read you, and that's
Sam
why.
Winning
If you're winning Ohio, then you got a 94% chance of winning.
I guess so. The Senate forecast still, middle of the road. It's 56. That's got to be fought out state by state, of course.
But also no polls.
Yeah, that's true. Fewer polls and lots of people. I mean, Trump can't say, I'm not with that Trump guy. He doesn't have that advantage. And they can say that even if it's not true, and people will believe it. And the power of incumbency being what it is, I can understand that. But,
right.
Okay.
So what do we have over the weekend for state polls? Let's just give you Sundays. Pennsylvania, McGinty +4 from Marist. And we have a tie from CVS YouGov. Again, this is all pre-tape release. Ohio, Portman plus 11, CBS YouGov. Wisconsin, Feingold plus 3, CBS YouGov. And Marist has Florida. That's the one that has Rubio over Murphy by plus 2. So those numbers aren't fantastic for the Republicans. And post-tape fallout. And what do? Are you with Trump? Are you not with Trump after that debate? Are you with Trump or not with Trump? That has to play out. It's going to take another week.
Okay. I'm not.
Yeah. I already know where it's going, but,
okay.
I'm just telling you.
All right.
Right.
Well,
also, is that just in? Let's see. 2/3 of independents say Trump video not a negative for them.
2/3 of independents say the video is not a negative. Okay.
But 31% say they do. I mean, that's the thing. You have to understand that if you lose 12% of Republicans because of this, which is what the NBC Survey Monkey poll says, or a third of independents, even though 2/3 say it doesn't matter, that's a big number, and it's going to have effects in terms of what happens on the election.
Okay.
Alrighty, with that, I'll leave you. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, very good.
Thanks so much, folks, for listening. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman. Kagro in the morning, occasionally letting him get a word in edgewise. I try not to, but it happens anyway. And if you like the show and want to hear the rest of what David has to say, stick around. If you don't like what I'm saying, hey, you can always tune in about a half hour into it, and you can skip me altogether. Especially easy to do on podcast, where a lot of people listen. Or download, or however you want to do it. Thanks for listening, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the updates. Trying to catch up on what people are gasping about here today. Let's see. That's interesting. Yeah, so I was just taking a look at Twitter, and it keeps freezing up on me, by the way. My tweet deck is a total mess, and I guess they want us to, it's a total mess, believe me. I guess they want us to migrate over to the online app version of it as opposed to the standalone app version. Anyway, Andrew Kaczynski, who, by the way, has moved in the last couple of days from BuzzFeed to CNN, which is a very interesting acquisition, and we could talk about ordinarily during a campaign that's not a blazing train wreck. You could stop and talk about the fact that, hey, how interesting is that? He made such a name for himself with his Google Ninja skills at BuzzFeed that he got picked up by CNN. But I don't even know if that's even a step up anymore. But okay, congratulations to him. We'll consider it a step up. He's done fantastic work. He's tweeting an OMG moment with a screen cap, I guess, from his phone. Chris Hayes has just said, wait, what? And it's already been pulled down if it was real. Let me take a look at this. Screen cap is Ivanka Trump's Twitter feed, and he opened up her profile and looked at the last tweets and retweets, etc. And it is, I mean, it certainly looks to be the verified Ivanka Trump Twitter feed, and she had, I guess, just retweeted Huffington Post politics tweet. And the tweet she retweeted was the one in which they say, Trump in 2004, it's okay to call daughter Ivanka a, quote, piece of ass. And that happened, by the way, over the weekend with the tapes. That wasn't even the Billy Bush tapes. It's the Howard Stern tapes. He's been on multiple media outlets saying things like this. If you missed that one, that was Howard Stern eliciting. Howard Stern seems to have played Donald Trump like a fiddle. I don't know whether he supports Trump nominally or not. I got to think that he thinks, nah, that guy shouldn't really be president. But I think I know he enjoys Donald Trump's company. He's great radio, and he enjoyed the ability to pull what will now be embarrassing statements out of him. And I do have a piece on that in Pocket, if we can ever get to what's backlogged in Pocket. But, yeah, that would be a mistake for her to retweet that one. And I guess she's already taken it down. So, I don't even know what to make of that exactly, but I don't know. Has everybody been retweeting that one? Yeah, that got a couple hundred retweets. But, yeah, it's already gone, I guess. But Well, I'll retweet it to put it on the record, and of course, for all of you to be able to see it at home in case you missed it. I'm not even sure where to go from here, except I don't know. Why is this video not playing in an endless loop this morning? Asks Mark Bennett. Let's see. Gideon Resnick tweet in here embedded. Again, just going to mention that in the 90s, Trump characterized Bill Clinton as a victim of unattractive women. Yes, that's true. I remember that as well, and I remembered that it was brought up over the weekend that, that's actually one of the, believe it or not, is one of the less interesting aspects to me of all of this. Should we backtrack? Should we even go back over what happened? I assume that you've all heard what the tapes, and when we say the tapes, I still think everybody's talking about the Billy Bush Access Hollywood tapes. And by the way, in case there's any confusion, if we didn't clear this up the first time Billy Bush was involved in a embarrassing release of tape with Donald Trump earlier in the election, Billy Bush is, I don't know whose son he is, but he is George W. Bush's cousin and George H.W. Bush's nephew. He's a son of, I don't know which one, Neil, Marvin, no idea, of the Bushes who haven't run for president. In case you were wondering if it was just strange coincidence, it's not. I don't know how he got to be where he is, but I assume his name carried him somewhere, and I assume he's been an entertaining enough host. He sounds like he can make fun banter, even if he doesn't recognize what is and isn't locker room chat. But you all have heard by now, wow, that was very Virginia of me. You have all heard by now what was in the tapes. I haven't actually listened to or watched the tapes. It's unnecessary as far as I'm concerned. But you've heard what they're about and what he says. And I got to say, there's a couple of spots in there that I don't get. And other people have explained it to me by saying, and it's the best explanation I've heard, has been that Trump is an older guy, and at that point he's, in his late 50s, 59 years old, almost 60 years old, and now he's 70, and he's just not had a normal life, and he doesn't have real friends that he hangs out with and talks about things, and so he has no... He tried to... Canadian pundit, Canuck pundit, by the way, says, I believe he's the son of Tito Bush. That could be it. That might explain the whole thing. It's Fredo's son, possibly. Anyway, the locker room chat excuse, I mean, thank God that immediately flopped. Everybody recognized that, no, this grab her stuff is not locker room chat, not normal person's locker room chat. Is that right? Billy Bush is the son of 85-year-old Jonathan Bush, who is George H.W. Bush's brother. He's the son of it? Oh, I thought he would be like a Marvin or whatever's son. So, okay, well, way to go, Jonathan. Okay. It's not like he had him when he was 85. I guess that's true. He's 85 now. I see what you mean. All right. So much younger brother. Thank you, Bill in Portland, for bringing us that one. A Kenny Bunkport watcher. He knows who belongs to whom in all of this. So these tapes. I don't know how much I really have to spend on it. I wanted to comment on what I think was so completely abnormal about these, without stopping on where he grabs her by. And by the way, I feel here's what will be my policy on that one. I might actually say that word out loud once or twice, maybe not today, but I'm sure that there are circumstances in which I would think it's allowable and you can get away with it, but others not. But on the other hand, one of the controversies over the weekend is, what do you think about other people saying it? And for instance, Anna Navarro quite famously was discussing the tapes on Friday, on Saturday, on the Sunday shows, and was saying, well, I mean, I guess here we have to say, okay, well, the line is, and most television and radio stations, I guess, for purposes of news breaking, have decided that, and maybe under the double entendre exception, that they were able to, without bleeping or otherwise censoring it, play the line that you know by now that Trump says that his version of how he would pursue a woman is, because he's famous, he can get away with this, he claims, grab her by the pussy. And it's difficult to say that. I mean, I got taught you don't say that. And then really, I got to be honest, I'm not like locker room chat guy, and I don't believe I have ever mustered whatever it would take. It's not courage, but it's something else. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a word for it. But to say that, even with my friends, in actual locker rooms, I just would be like, yeah, that's not something I say. Sometimes I'm sure I said to myself, although usually in the archaic, now proven politically incorrect versions, like along with other words that I no longer permit myself to use in public discussion and try never to use them even in private thought. I grew, playground growing up and saying somebody that you wanted to insult as ridiculously wimpy, that's what people would say about them. And then, of course, growing to adulthood and learning, and chiefly from women on this, why would you use that word at all? And why would you use that word to refer to somebody as somehow feminine, as though that was an insult? And that had a lot of power wrapped up in it. And I said, okay, gonna have to find something else about that. You're right. But anyway, what about the case of Ana Navarro saying? I guess in many ways it's like any other word that some people can get away with and other people can't. But I mean, no shying away from it. And I guess the women who are prepared to denounce this, for them I say, I'm getting out of your way. You can say it all. That's what the man said. You can say it all you like. And besides which, it belongs to you. And you can say it when you want to say it. I would be cautious with it. That's all I would warn you about. But there was a fight on one of the panel shows between Ana Navarro and some Republican woman who basically, while Ana Navarro was describing what happened, said, it's really becoming offensive. My children are watching, and I want you to stop saying that word, which was really her saying that she thought that Ana Navarro was overplaying her hand and was purposefully repeating the words to be shocking so that the shock would come to rest at Donald Trump's feet and people would be more angry and upset with him. I think that's what she was getting at, but Ana Navarro fired back immediately, and correctly, don't tell me you're offended by my quoting your candidate here. You weren't, and to say, we'll have to move past this, it was locker room chat. I'm not offended when Donald Trump says it, but I'm offended when Ana Navarro says she's offended by the fact that Donald Trump said it. I couldn't put it any better than that. Anyway, it's just, the whole thing has been rather amazing. I'm sure I've never heard anybody say that. Even people who I know who are much freer about using language like that. That's not terminology. Well, I mean, the word is terminology I've heard, but to grab her by it doesn't even, I don't know, it doesn't make much sense. I understand the idea of, put your hand where it doesn't belong kind of thing. But I've never heard anybody say it quite that way. But okay, maybe they do. That's not completely out of the question. The rest of it, though, I mean, and I know this is all beside the point, but I was tweeting about this morning. I promise you I have never heard anybody say, what did he say? how did he put it? I tried to get there. I couldn't get there. How did he phrase it? I hit on. It wasn't even I hit on her, but like I tried like a, remember that one? I tried like a bitch. Like, what? Again, I'm not even offended at the use of the word here, bitch. I mean, that's actually still makes it and still gets past the censors anyway. Though it's not a nice one and not one I'm super comfortable with, and I always kind of pull up short on that if it's unless it's son of a bitch, which is also, I don't know why, because it's the same thing that we're talking about. But he that line of I moved on her. That was it. I moved on her like a bitch. I've never heard anybody say that. And not because I think, oh my God, that's so dirty and disgusting and foul, and I don't hang out with such people. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't really even feel like it makes any kind of slang sense. Somebody offered up the explanation that maybe it's something that he picked up from somebody, who was 20 something or, even a teenager at the time, and he thought he would sound really hip and cool. How old does that sound? Hip and cool. He's going to be really 23 skidoo with that. But he was talking to a younger guy here, Billy Bush, and thought that Billy Bush would think, hey, he's still on the scene, hey man, I'm talking to you from the 1960s here. He's still got it. He's still in the mix, and he knows the slang, but I don't believe I ever heard that one. Now, by the time he said that, he was 59. Billy Bush was in his 30s. I was in my 30s, and I hadn't heard that. I wouldn't even have recognized that as, oh, that's what the kids are saying these days. I never heard it. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. The guy is from another planet. Important point in that, too, by the way, that he was just, a lot of the excuses that maybe that were offered was that maybe he didn't really do this stuff. He was just saying he did in order to sound like he was a man's man. And Julian Sanchez, normative on Twitter, and who you may know as a columnist, and God only knows where he is these days. I have no idea anymore. I can't track such people. But Julian Sanchez, I think fairly well known on Twitter. I have to go back to his thing. Why won't Twitter just settle on what I asked it for? What is going on here? Anyway, he had said earlier today, and now I'll try and scroll down in his feed since it has clicked over to mine, from mine to his. Dang, where was it? Did he really say? He's been very active this morning. Can't seem to find it. I gotta click back. Here we go. Did we get to mine? Here we go. So Julian Sanchez said this morning, if Anderson Cooper, debate moderator nominally, had only followed up with, quote, so you were just lying to impress a younger man? We might have gotten a Colonel Jessup moment out of Trump. That I think is true. I think he has that right. There'd be a genuine possibility that he would have said, no, I wasn't trying to impress a younger man. What are you getting at? He would have been so homophobic about it that he would have preferred to, as Julian says, preferred to admit the assaults rather than let his Don Juan facade crack. And I think he's onto something there. He might be exactly right about that. But the other pieces of that discussion, I also don't recognize as human language. It's certainly not English. You know what I'm saying here? Moved on her like a bitch is something I've never heard anybody say. But I could buy it. If you told me, I don't know, that kids are saying it, I would say, not my kids. They're not old enough yet. But I guess I'd believe it. If you told me that it was, slang among, I don't know. I would have no way of knowing whether I was in touch with that or not. So I guess you could get away with that. But I promise you this. These other parts of it there's no way you can make sense out of it. Though I suppose that possibly my other possible explanation for moved on her like a bitch is this possibly bad transcription of the tape? Because for the longest time we all thought that Donald Trump was saying bigly about stuff. I did this bigly or that bigly, and it turned out to be big league. I guess that's possible, but I don't think there's much mistaking these other parts, which include him saying that not only that he tried to, I know he uses the F word in that one too. That one we definitely can't say on the radio. I did try to F, and by the way, yeah, it took a while to figure this out, who they were talking about, because it's just him and Billy Bush just having their so-called locker room banter. And it turns out now that they've identified who they were talking about. Who was he trying to get there with? Who was he trying to F? Who was he? Although this wasn't who he was saying he would grab necessarily. But he goes on saying he was hitting on this woman, but she was married. I couldn't get there, right? He didn't score, man. And it was, they referred to her by her first name, Nancy. And then the discussion goes on. I'll get back to this, but it's Nancy I won't get back. I'll have to talk about it right now. Nancy Odell. Did not know who that was by name, but this was rather amazing, because Nancy Odell was at the time, I believe, was Billy Bush's co-host on Access Hollywood. She's now on another program. He also was on another program. And that really was the part that hit me about, up to that point, I thought there was possibility that, that his employer would let him go on this. Billy Bush would be able to just claim, the guy was going bananas, talking all kinds of craziness. And I was like nervously laughing along because I didn't know what the hell to do with this guy. He was bonkers. And he's Donald Trump, and what am I going to do? And I might have even bought that, although I'm sure that I would have then got to work and all the women in the workplace would have said, "You bought that? You're an idiot." I demand that then I would have probably given in and said, "Yeah, I don't think I really thought this through all the way. We got to get that one out of here." Frog in the throat. Pepe the Frog is in my throat today. But I think they would have made what would have sold it to me is I'm imagining myself as an NBC. Is that on NBC? What channel has Access Hollywood? Whatever. I'm an Access Hollywood executive, and I'm thinking, he told me he didn't know what the hell to do, so he laughed and went along with it. And then if you had said to me, yeah, but he's talking about Nancy in this, and they work together. How are they going to co-host when they're together on the screen? I mean, what are we going to do about that? What kind of environment are you putting us in here? And now they'd be talking about the Today Show. He talked of this way, or he allowed him to talk about his co-host. He could have said, he really did have a perfect out. If they were talking about a random woman, I almost could see, because I hate that kind of confrontation. Would I be cowardly in that situation? If I'm Billy Bush and that's Donald Trump, and I value Donald Trump, like I don't value Donald Trump, but I suppose in 2005, I don't know, that would be, I know I felt differently about Donald Trump in 2005 than I feel about him now. I didn't love him then, but I thought he was, one, I thought he was rich. Two, I thought he's a famous guy. I'm not really, and my job is to interview him, and there's a good chance that I would have been like, and I would have been thinking, now, Billy Bush might have been thinking, all right, awesome, up high. Whereas I would have been thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Get me out of here. Or probably, is anybody rolling tape on this? I'm going to be a millionaire. But you wouldn't have been a millionaire from that in 2005. No one would have, well, not that no one would have cared, but people would have said, he's Donald Trump, but who cares? I'll buy the tape, $100,000, but not $1 million. But I guess it's entirely possible that I could have excused somebody who would have said, I just buckled, I didn't know what to do. But then to say that was your coworker. Now that's something else. That's something where I would have said, at a minimum, I mean, if you really don't want to be confrontational and you don't want to like say something, and you I guess you could imagine Donald Trump blowing up at you and trying to destroy you for some reason, you could still say, hey, I got to tell you, I mean, it's funny and all, but we're talking about my coworker here. We really got to get off this subject. I can't have this, but you're making me uncomfortable. You want to talk about anybody else in the world? Okay. It's not okay, but that's the sort of thing you say to extricate yourself from it, and he didn't do that. And I would think that on the, behind the scenes in the executive suites at the Today Show, any woman who appears on the Today Show, if she had come into my office and said, this guy he's not going to have our backs on anything. We don't want to be around this guy. I would say, I think I'm stuck. I think you got me there. I cannot come up with a reason why you need to sit still for Billy Bush being on set with you. I can't. And I will say this also, I mean, as if you're really making this decision as an executive, and again, at NBC and the Today Show, there really are, millions of dollars and lots of jobs at stake and everything, and I could see having a more difficult time making a decision if Billy Bush is a bigger star. Like if it's Matt Lauer comes back from this, right, and then everybody says, well, he's got to go, I could see the executive saying, we really need to work this one out. I don't know if you don't get to the same conclusion, because ultimately there's still no getting around the fact that all the women are going to say, you got a weirdo predator on your hands and you're putting him on a set with me. And even if he's not the predator, the fact that the guy wouldn't even say, whoa, this is my coworker. It's hilarious, man. It's all just locker room chat and all, but it can't be about, I wouldn't want it about my sister, my mother, or my coworker. And these guys only feel empathy for the people they know. So I could see them coming up with it on that one. But he didn't even get to that level, and that's pretty disturbing. So there we go. Finally, I'm around to the executive decision. Yeah, I guess I'd fire Billy Bush too, and Matt Lauer for that matter. But with Matt Lauer, we'd say we got to get on the phone with legal, and how much is it going to cost us to do this? It shouldn't cost us anything. It should be a freebie, but I understand he's going to say, I got a contract. Billy Bush will too, but I can get out of that one. Or I'll pay that contract out. How much are we paying that guy? Matt Lauer could be an economic problem, but we'll solve that one. Phew. That would suck. I'm glad why did I do that? I put myself through that, and it's not my job. I don't even get not only do I not get the big bucks, I don't get any bucks at all for that. Why did I torture myself that way? I don't know. But by way of, I guess, finishing up the dismissal of the locker room chat thing, I guess there might be a lot of women out there who worry that, well, maybe what if this is locker room chat for men? Do they do this? And lots of men have been pretty straightforward in promising you that it's not. I assume it happens somewhere in some locker rooms. I would guess you might find it in bodybuilding and MMA gyms where everything is this hyper masculinity. And these days with this, the frothy mix, if you will, with the alt-right being shocking and base and outrageous is sometimes part of the act. But I don't know. I've never heard any of this, and I've certainly never heard move on her like a bitch. But and just to get even further out from the point, I promise you this: I'll swear on any holy scripture you'd like to bring me, or if there's any scientific texts you'd like me to swear on in this one, I promise you that I have never, ever heard anyone even come close to saying, and I tried to hook up with her so bad, I took her shopping for furniture. I do not know. Are you sure you were in a locker room? I mean, is that, honestly, if a guy, I'd have trouble with a guy who says, you gotta grab her, in the locker room, I'd be like, shh, keep your voice down. I don't want anybody to know I'm with you in this chat here. You're gonna attract attention. But I mean, if a guy says to me, and she was so hot, so I'm trying everything I know. I took her furniture shopping. It's a record scratch. All right, what? How was that going to work? And that's just not even getting to the fact that this is Donald Trump we're talking about. It might have been the most disgusting part of the whole tape is the thought that he's giving her advice on how to buy furniture. Have you seen his furniture? That's crazy. I mean, Nancy O'Dell, now I got to see Nancy O'Dell's apartment. Can you imagine you're Nancy O'Dell, you're married, Donald Trump is 100 million years old, he's hitting on you, and you know, look, Donald, it's not going to happen. Well, I understand you're looking for furniture. I know all about furniture. Let me tell you some of the best places to get furniture. What? I would almost rather you grab me, as you had described, than I have to look at your idea of great furniture. And by the way, maybe I shouldn't even, it seems comedic at the time, but I did get a note over the weekend, at least one, and I think it was only one, objection to making that kind of a crack, and people saying, oh my God, one woman who said, it's not a joking matter, you can't even make that joke. Most people, I think, got it, but I guess I see the point. Like, I don't know, but this is my way of dealing with things. I've never grabbed anybody. I've never told anybody to grab anybody. And I would be mortified if somebody did, though I have to admit, I don't know that I would stop the conversation and say, that is unacceptable, sir. You are ejected from my locker room forever. I would probably, in most cases, I would probably hope that he would just stop talking. I don't know that I would get up and leave a conversation, although I don't know, maybe I would if we were out in public and it wasn't a locker room, and there was, particularly if it's mixed company, I'd be like, oh, okay. At the minimum, I'd be like, I gotta go get a drink. Holy cow. I gotta get out of here. And if it gets like abusive to where it's obvious that the women are uncomfortable, then I guess I'd probably say, at a minimum, hey, what are you doing? I think everybody's a little weirded out by that. Maybe we want to change the subject here. Versus, of course, tearing my shirt off and saying, oh, kick your ass, how dare you. Stand up for the chivalry of I don't know. It's a whole thing is a weird thing. I don't understand any of it from start to finish. That's all I have to say about that. But that isn't the end of the tape thing either. There is, of course, the fact that and this is what Andrew Kaczynski spent his weekend on, mining the archives of the Howard Stern show for juicy bits and also horrific misogyny in Donald Trump's appearances on that show. And they've been numerous. The one about calling Ivanka a piece of ass comes from that. And now here, I guess we're closer to locker room chat. I mean, certainly I can't say I've never heard anybody say piece of ass actually literally in a locker room. But I don't know. Usually the discussion doesn't even come around to that because there's too many actual asses in your face in a locker room where, you know what, let's save it for later. But, I mean, that's closer to what might pass for locker room chat. But the whole idea of having Donald Trump on the Howard Stern show, Howard Stern knew exactly what he was doing and just wanted to have those kinds of talks about objectifying women. That was his shtick. And that, slipped by with most listeners as, well, it's weird. It's locker room chat, etc. But, the attraction of it is Howard Stern is eliciting this from famous people who ought to know better. And that's somehow interesting. I don't think I need to go through the Howard Stern stuff. It'll come out in drips and drabs, of course, because there's tons of that tape, which also brings us to another subject, which is that It is alleged that there is hot mic and off-camera, etc., additional tape from the many years of taping of The Apprentice, in which it is said that Donald Trump says other things that are terrible. I don't know. I was going to say, well, it says far worse. I don't know if he does say far worse or whatever, but certainly the allegation now is that he is on tape using the N word. He uses all the words that can only be abbreviated with one letter, apparently. And that I don't even know. I guess I was going to say I don't find that terribly surprising. I think that's probably something I expected that he would have said at some point, but I'm not even sure about that. Talking about women, I understand that I should expect a guy like him who objectifies, and I mean professionally objectifies women, in addition to his personal life, would go there. I don't immediately find that there is reason for me to believe that Donald Trump in his casual conversation is loose with racist terminology. I don't think that has the same kind of impact on his life. He just sort of ignores minorities, or when he's discussing them at all, he's like, bunch of criminals. But I don't know, the visceral hatred that goes with the use of that kind of terminology freely, openly, among his peers on the show anyway. I thought that really required a deeper day-to-day racism than I thought he had. So that's troubling. But I guess it's not surprising in that, I mean, other developments over the weekend were reminded that he has always thought that the Central Park Five, if you can think back to your New York history, were guilty. And even though they have been since exonerated by DNA evidence, Donald Trump figures he's smarter than DNA scientists and says, he actually doubled down post-exoneration and says they were guilty. And back in the day, I don't know whether he made clear in modern, in today, the last couple of days, whether he believes that they ought to be executed. But in the day, at the time, he took out a full-page ad saying that he thought they were guilty and that in calling for the death penalty as punishment. And if he still thinks they're guilty, then presumably he would still think that they ought to be executed, despite the fact that they've been exonerated by DNA evidence. I don't know whether he thinks that's phony or what, but I guess that's pretty good evidence of a deep and abiding racism too, because why else? But I think, there was an awful lot over the weekend that makes us think hard about who he is and what the hell he's doing here. And one of the developments, which I'm saving for Wednesday, I actually recorded this and I was thinking of using it today, but the debate and the events of the weekend just made it impossible to not do a live show today. But I'll warn you, /tease you, /invite you to listen to the Wednesday show. I still have to edit it together to make sure that it fits in time, but a piece that I spent an awful lot of time over the weekend promoting to people, and sometimes it wasn't clear that I had not written it. I'm promoting it so hard people thought I wrote it. But the piece that I mentioned, I think, on Friday by Swedish Jewfish is the handle being used on Daily Kos for this one. Remember the title? We all knew about the trafficking, the untold story of Trump model management, part 1. How hard did I promote this? I promoted this so hard that when I talked to my dad last night pre-debate, he said, have you heard about this story? Your brother told me about this story that he saw, I think, on Daily Kos about Trump and his modeling agency. That's how hard I promoted it. I mean, my brothers do follow me on Twitter and may have seen it from there, so it's not a difficult line to trace, but I don't typically hear from them on Twitter that, oh yeah, I read that, like you said. And I mean, people were retweeting that like mad because it's a hell of a title for one thing. and it's a hell of a story, and it's a long, long read too. And I was telling people it was a long read, and lots of people over the weekend, dozens, literally, were retweeting it saying this is long, but you must read this thing. And I can't wait for the second installment to come out, and I'm curious about where Swedish Jewfish would like to go with all of this. But I thought it made a great narrative, and so I'm going to do you this favor. It's so long, I could see that a lot of people, it literally becomes too long, didn't read, even though you know that it's important. Although a lot of people read it all the way through and said, I can't believe it, because I said there's no way I'm going to finish this. But it's spellbinding. It really is. She really tells the tale incredibly. And the story I'll tell to you on Wednesday. I know that there are a lot of people who wouldn't be able to get through it. I read it for you. I read the whole thing out. I was going to use it on Monday today for the show, but I'm saving it for Wednesday because we're definitely not going to be able to do a Wednesday show. And so if you've set that piece aside to read and you don't want to go through the trouble, I couldn't wait if I were you. Honestly, I see that headline. But if you know anybody who you think would be interested in this, turn them on to the podcast for Wednesday and let them hear this. And by the way, it also got some very interesting retweets, including, who thought this was interesting enough to retweet? And I was like, you get that woo celebrity thrill when you find out that they've retweeted something. It was Christy Brinkley apparently knows a little something about the modeling industry. She retweeted this thing. Like, this is important. You should look. If it seems to ring true to her, that would really be something. I didn't get that message from her, but I did then ask, there's another famous model who's like really active on Twitter, Chrissy Teigen, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And her account is now locked because I assume lots of crazy Trump trolls have been pestering the hell out of her. Although, honestly, why a famous model's personal account wouldn't be locked on Twitter, because I imagine trolls of all sorts have been pestering her for a long time, asking her if she would go furniture shopping, if you get my drift. But I figured I'd send it to her. I put her name and the address and asked her, does this ring true to you? Because actually her name came up in some of the additional reading that I've done inspired by this Swedish Jewfish piece. It's incredible where it sends you, and it's a sprawling story, and I try to set it up the best I can and then present it. And I can't wait until Wednesday to talk about some of this stuff. Some of the things that I have in pocket that will be ancillary stories to that are themselves incredible. And I could waste the entirety of 2 more shows talking about it. And I might, but not before Wednesday. So big teaser there. Be on hand for that one. Now, the question is whether at this point I tease that with additional materials or go a different direction. And I think probably to get the most out of today's show, we just got to go in a different direction. So let me scan down and see what I got that we can fit in here. Let's go this way. Here's the correct direction. It's Daily Kos Radio. Once again, I'm going to have to go back to Daily Kos, and not surprising, back to Mark Sumner. It's still going to be Donald Trump. That's all there is at this point. Donald Trump went crying to Congress for a very special tax break. This seems like small potatoes compared to what happened over the weekend, I know, but we'll be talking about that all week long. Bulk of every show, I promise. I threaten you with this. It's terrible. I wish that wasn't the case. But there's so much to unpack. This guy is so deeply sick that you really are going to have to spend a week unpacking just what happened this weekend. And it's so deeply connected to so many other things he's done in his past. I don't know how you ever get off the subject. It's a fascinating subject, but so is Charles Manson. Should lock them both up so you can study them. Donald Trump went crying to Congress for a very special tax break. Who cares? You all should, because it's a very particular tax break, and it came up last night in the debate. It's not, it's not off topic. All right. So let me start with Mark's piece here. And in case there's any connective tissue missing, I don't think there is. Not because of his writing, but connecting it to what happened in the debate last night. I believe that when I read you the story, you'll get it, is what I'm saying. If not, I feel like there's blanks to be filled in. We'll do that. In 1990, Donald Trump opened the biggest casino in Atlantic City. In 1991, that casino filed for bankruptcy. Thank you. And that's the whole thing. Yes. Oh, by the way, I see here Joel Roberts, who's Joel S. Roberts 1. I think that's the whole name. No, I'm sorry. J.S. Roberts. My goodness. J.S. Roberts 1960, if you want to follow along on Twitter. I like plugging people who write in about the show on Twitter. I think we should all follow one another. You can widen your circles, of course. You don't have to exclusively follow one another. But it's a nice thing to do when people make comments. He just was saying, I read The Diary by Swedish Jewfish as soon as I saw it. Fascinating. Can't wait for more. I think there's a lot of people can't wait for more. And a lot of people were asking me questions as though I had written it. And I was saying I didn't. And, well, it's a Daily Kos. You must know who did. I really don't. I don't know her background. I don't know her personally. I've never had any contact with her. A lot of people were saying the piece needs editing or maybe even some more sourcing. It's not a journalist's piece, but it seems to, actually most of the sourcing seems to be from books that themselves were sourced pretty heavily, I assume, but I guess you can't assume anything anymore. And it's a great piece, a great narrative. Another one, Mark Sumner's, I'll continue with right here. So, okay, 1990, Trump opens the biggest casino in Atlantic City. 1991, 1 year later, casino files for bankruptcy. Lots of the debt Donald Trump had personally guaranteed from his completely unworkable attempt to operate 3 competing casinos in the same small city. Remember that's at bottom what was going on here. And to finance his casino with high-interest junk bonds, most of that debt fell back on his shoulders. Incredibly risky, right? And think billions of dollars eventually at stake, but certainly $1 billion or so from him personally, or things that he was on the hook for from the banks. So he did what any big businessman in America would do. He went crying to Congress. And here an excerpt from an old New York Times. Not even that old. Very recent, I guess. So it's the recent coverage, recent look back at the 1990s move. The New York Times piece says, speaking in a flurry of words without notes, that sounds familiar, Donald J. Trump painted the matter in apocalyptic terms. By the way, he was much better spoken when he spoke to Congress. I've seen 2 pieces of testimony from him to Congress in the past, and he's not bad. His speeches, I think, are intentionally 5th grade level. He's actually, he was anyway, in that setting, quite eloquent. He was mostly talking out of his ass, but I mean, he did so in an eloquent fashion, I thought. Speaking in a flurry of words without notes, Donald J. Trump painted the matter in apocalyptic terms. Unless Congress did as he urged, he said, the United States would face catastrophe. We are not different right now than the Soviet Union, Mr. Trump said. They have no incentive, and we have no incentive. That's not all that eloquent, but it's not bad. And by the way, how brilliant. He foreshadows the economic meltdown. He may have caused part of the economic meltdown as well, but that's the sort of thing that normally people would say, what are you, crazy? You can't come to Congress and say things like that. Of course, by 2007, the Treasury Secretary comes to Congress and says just that. But okay, somehow that carries more weight when the Treasury Secretary says it. Okay, it took a couple of years, but Trump actually got exactly what he wanted. A rule change that gave real estate developers unmatched flexibility in writing off losses and tax-free forgiveness of debt. And this also from the New York Times, I believe. The debt forgiveness rule was most important to highly leveraged big players like Trump, said Edward D. Kleinbart, a law professor at the University of Southern California. The 1993 Act was designed to loosen the screws on the real estate industry. Well, no one would ever say that Donald Trump doesn't have his screws loosened. Trump created a public company. This is his solution to having a huge personal debt from overbetting on all of his casinos and losing. Trump then, he created a public company onto which he could shovel his private debt. But he couldn't have done it without the rules changes Congress provided. Okay? What were those? In 7 years, for almost 7 years, real estate developers had to live by rules. Like much of his industry, Mr. Trump, and this I think also comes from the New York Times piece because there's no additional link here. Much of the industry, Mr. Trump was taken somewhat by surprise when Congress moved aggressively in 1986. That would be under Ronald Reagan. Moved in 1986 to crack down on real estate tax shelters. Tax treatment of real estate losses then allowed developers to acquire or build properties purely to generate paper losses for their investors. Those people who really think of tax shelters, are thinking of this, and it's largely anachronistic. We just don't have anything quite like that anymore. Although the rules change made it somewhat close, but you really had to be an enormous player. The old tax shelter things was something you could hide income with if you were just a upper middle class person who had a good year. And as a matter of fact, it's noted in here. Tax treatment of real estate losses then, before 86, allowed developers to acquire or build properties purely to generate paper losses for their investors, the proverbial lawyers and dentists, to apply against other earnings. Even ruinous projects like a half-finished unleased office tower could be converted into a profit-making venture for some investors. That's why Donald Trump got into that business as opposed to his dad's business, which was highly successful, but bang for the buck wasn't what Donald Trump was looking for. He was looking for mega millions and billions of dollars with very little work. And though there were hundreds of millions of dollars in the Trump empire, he was busting his ass doing stuff that nobody regarded as seriously, flashy, upper echelon, 1% of 1% kind of work. You know what? Just affordable housing. You weren't going to have Hollywood movie stars and rich oil barons partying with you, jockeying for position to get the best apartments in your middle income affordable housing project. Penthouse suite in Manhattan? Maybe. Now you're talking. That's where he wanted to be. Even under the 1986 rules, Mark continues, real estate developers still had more flexibility in the scope and means of reporting losses than other industries. But it wasn't enough. Without a better means of getting rid of debt, developers couldn't enrich themselves off losing investments. In other words, you know what? This is this actually makes me think is a interesting precursor to stand your ground, believe it or not. What connection could that possibly have? It's not a direct connection. It's the concept. The people are trying always, I guess, and the better a lobbyist you are and the more money you have to pass out and the more legitimate sounding you can make your business, the more likely you are to succeed in essentially rigging the system. He's right there, so that you win when you lose. In other words, making a guaranteed profit. Can I change the law in a way that I can lock in profits no matter what? And in many ways in real estate, the answer was yes. I relate it to stand your ground in that, again, it's trying to eliminate the downside of the system. If I shoot somebody, I don't want to have to answer for it. If I say the magic words, I feared for my life. That seems like harder to get through than this stuff, but both have worked. So, all right. Even under the 86 rules, right, they had more flexibility than other industries, but they wanted to be able to take a profit even when they invested in something that sucked. I mean, think about that just for a second, too. I'm still going to delay getting back to Mark's article here. What you're asking for is you do all this bragging about we got to have tax cuts for the rich because, well, one, it's going to trickle down. And that was ridiculous even when they said it with Donald Trump. Nothing has trickled from that guy for decades. He doesn't give charity. He doesn't pay taxes. And he doesn't pay vendors so that things don't trickle down that way either. He's the antithesis of trickle down. But he preaches trickle down because nobody believes that he doesn't pay for anything. But that's the reality. He's gaming that system harder than almost anybody. But lots of people make art forms that are not paying for anything. More on that, by the way, later in the week in terms of the lifestyle of people who manage to live the life of luxury without paying for anything. We got to talk a little bit more about that. You're not going to want to get up for work on Thursday. Okay, or Friday, because we'll finish up the story probably by Thursday. So what did Trump want here? He wanted he wanted loopholes. One word, loopholes. That's what Mark says. And what kind of loophole did he want? He wanted something that, even if he didn't create jobs, even if he didn't create tax or shareholder value, he still wanted to make money. It is pretty incredible that for the people who are preaching maximizing shareholder value and I have a fiduciary duty to this, that, and the other thing, and all what it all comes down to is I just try to do what makes my investors the most money and that's a good thing. Remember that's key to the success of MBA culture. That all of this really at bottom evil crap that people pull on one another, and the people that they bilk out of their dollars, it's all okay because, after all, amassing lots and lots of money in the hands of even a few people is okay because, one, it'll trickle down, and two, it creates jobs, and three, we're just doing what the market demands. Look here, they're saying, if the market brands us a failure, I still want cash. Why? You should lose what you invested, and honestly, we should penalize you for doing things that are wrong, that are bad for the economy. In one theory, and of course, okay, what usually ends up happening is you say, well, you don't want to penalize people for taking risks, because after all, this is the excuse. It's the risk takers who are creating the jobs. All right, fine. But then there has to be a way in law to figure out the difference between risk takers and people who say, I am intentionally going to lose on this and build something that no one wants and then just deduct it. I don't know how you do that. Not sure how you design that. And so they knew you couldn't, and so they asked for the loophole anyway because they were just going to exploit it. So what kind of loopholes? And what was it? Well, as Trump comments in this piece here from the current piece, quoting him from 1990, it is a very bad sounding word, even though it isn't necessarily a bad thing, these loopholes. No, it is also a bad thing, Mark comments. With it, Trump went on to bankruptcy after bankruptcy, as well as 2 decades of going income tax free. So, what are the particulars of this case? We may, in this case, have to go to his original source, the source for the article, the New York Times, and read this piece all the way through to get a flavor for exactly what he asked for and what he got and how he got it and why it relates to last night's debate. When Donald Trump went to Washington and got himself a tax break. It's a Nicholas Confessori piece from October 6th of this year. The piece begins with what I told you up at the top from Mark's article, speaking in a flurry of words without notes, etc., etc. And then he compares us at the time to the Soviet Union, which still existed, I guess, barely at the time. It was late in 1991, after all. And Mr. Trump was sitting before a special panel in Washington's Cannon House office building. His pitch for lawmakers to relax tax rules that Mr. Trump said strangled the real estate industry and left the country mired in depression. Everyone remembers the real estate depression of the mid-1990s. Of course, this was the early 1990s. We were still in the George H.W. Bush recession. I remember it well. Graduating from college from after the boom years of the mid-'80s, the Wall Street, the movie type boom, and then seeing everybody go off and make millions on Wall Street, only to have it all collapse in the junk bond scandal later on. And then by the time I'm ready to graduate, it's recession and nobody can get any jobs and we're all temping. Every time a George Bush won the presidency, college graduates lost their ability to get jobs right off the bat. And then in between, in the Clinton presidency, when I was already off on my own path, I found that college graduates were being recruited with signing bonuses and being told that they could take their dogs to work, and the concierge service would give them a nice dinner to take home with them after work. I missed that. Anyway, it was 1991 at the time. Trump's testimony was a rare, if utterly Trumpian, public foray into Washington lobbying for him. Remember, he's not a politician. He's just a lobbyist. And in less than 2 years, as part of a wide-ranging budget deal, Congress passed a set of provisions that stood to be enormously lucrative to Mr. Trump and the rest of the real estate industry, which lobbied broadly for the changes. Unless Mr. Trump releases full copies of his tax returns, yeah, right, don't forget those though, it will be difficult to know exactly how lucrative, but provisions in the final legislation could have helped him avoid large tax bills linked to the enormous debt he racked up in the early 1990s, while also allowing him to spin other real estate losses into valuable offsets on his future earnings on licensing, television, and other ventures. By 1995, according to documents published by the New York Times last week, it would be the week before last, I guess now, Mr. Trump had accumulated losses of $916 million, an astonishing sum for a single entrepreneur, as we know, and as we discussed last week, and as Michael Luo noted, 2%, right? Wasn't it 2% of the entirety of business losses claimed for the year nationwide by everyone who filed taxes? That's really astonishing. So, by the way, I'm not kidding. When I say things like it may be that Donald Trump helped create these various economic crashes, I mean, if you're losing 2% of the economy's losses by yourself, you're not kidding. The debt forgiveness rule was most important to highly leveraged big players like Trump. Remember, that's Edward Kleinbard, the professor at the University of Southern California. And this 1993 bill that was the result of his lobbying was designed to loosen the screws on the real estate industry. Hope Hicks, remember her? How does she do it? She got into this article. A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump's campaign, by the way, less and less of a role for her every day, it seems, said Thursday that Mr. Trump had testified to the panel as a, quote, highly regarded and extremely successful business and industry leader, joining other real estate interests in pushing for the new rules. Of course, even by 1990, it was pretty clear that his casinos were going to collapse from under him, but I don't know, everybody believed in the illusion at the time, perhaps. They weren't gone yet. These reforms ultimately helped save tens of thousands of American jobs, Ms. Hicks said. Like much of his industry, Mr. Trump was taken somewhat by surprise when Congress moved aggressively in 1986 to crack down on real estate tax shelters. By the way, he was taken by surprise. Pretty much every Republican in the last, I don't know, I guess since this happened, right? Since Reagan basically has insisted that their tax plan, were they to become president, would be to lower rates across the board, obviously, and cutting taxes for the wealthy would be most important, but cutting taxes for everybody, they say, but eliminating loopholes and tax shelters and such so that there was an effective tax rate for everybody that was lower, but we would still net as much, if not more, because, we would just make the tax system less complicated and be more straightforward with the taxation. So it's interesting that the biggest tax reform of its day caught them all by surprise, since that was supposed to, I guess, since it was the first time out of the box, they were all just listening to Reagan and his people say it and saying, oh yeah, I do want that. And maybe they hadn't become masters of tax theory at that point. But how it catches you by surprise, I don't know. Anyway, tax treatment of real estate losses then allowed developers to acquire or build properties purely to generate those paper losses for investors. Even ruinous projects like a half-finished unleased office tower could be converted into profit-making venture for some investors, including, as they note here, the proverbial lawyers and dentists. Back in the day, that was something you could do with small investors. You'd call them up and say, I want to get in on this. I want a big tax shelter, but I don't have enough money to build a office park, and I certainly don't have enough money to actually administer leasing it out. But don't worry about it. The point is to generate losses so that we can hide income. Do you want to give me a couple of bucks so you can be listed as an investor so you can book losses? And you would just call the local lawyers and dentists and raise the money that way. When Mr. Trump arrived in Washington in 1991, He and other developers were struggling, as he explained to the lawmakers. In the real estate business, we are in an absolute depression, Mr. Trump said. The 1986 changes had been personally problematic for him, he said, suggesting that the more restrictive tax rules had compromised properties he had snapped up during that decade. In other words, he had made bad bets. He had bet that the things he bought would be big tax shelters, and then they changed the tax shelter law, and he suddenly found himself, oh my God, now I just have empty office buildings, not tax shelters. He made a bet and he lost. So what did he do? He came to change the terms of the bet, just like everything else, right? I want pianos for the Taj Mahal. How much? $100,000. Sold. I'll take it. Give me the pianos. Here's $30,000. That's all you're getting. He made a bad bet. You shouldn't pay $100,000 for pianos. So he wanted to pay $30,000. He didn't even want to pay that, and then you go back and just say, this is what you're getting. So you can't do that with the government, of course, but you can try and change the law. They changed the game on me, Mr. Trump said. In his office, as Mr. Trump confided, they had a new saying, survive until 1995, when he could book $1 billion worth of losses. Did he survive until 1995? But that's interesting. That's his crying. They changed the game on me. Yeah, game gets changed. It's actually called risk. That's called business, right? That's the way it goes. You made a dumb bet and lost. And a lot of other people saw it coming. Because, honestly, public policy on stuff like this is a freight train. When it happens, if you pay any attention whatsoever, you know when it's coming. Nobody gets caught by surprise by tax policy. Anyway, survive until 1995. That's what he was saying. And then we can book $1 billion in loss. Good surviving. He raged against real estate lobbyists sitting behind him in the hearing room, calling them pathetic for not beating back the earlier loophole closings. Fine. Congress, he said, should bring back the loopholes that had made the old tax shelters so popular. It's a very bad-sounding word, even though it isn't necessarily a bad thing, Mr. Trump said. He even said that the recession had been caused by President Ronald Reagan's 1986 tax overhaul, a conclusion few economists shared, and could be ended only by allowing investor dollars to flow easily back into his industry, real estate. It wasn't that he couldn't just find another business, right? Yours has been closed off. Adapt. Move at the speed of business, man. No, what we need to do is, I'm in this business. I need to legalize this business again. That's very sluggish thinking. Low energy, I think. Anyway, Mr. Trump even argued that the very basis of the policy, against the very basis of the policy, he said, the very best way to get a recovery, he said, was to raise income taxes on wealthy people and prod them to invest again in syndicated real estate deals. In other words, his tax solution to the recession in 1991 was, what you do is make the tax code more complicated. Raise the tax level, but then tell everybody, don't worry, we're not really going to collect that money for you because we're going to write new, complicated loopholes into the law. Now, of course, and even by then, tax theory for Republicans generally across the board was, if not flat tax with no deductions, but an honest tax rate, then it was at least simplified graduated income tax levels for, I think they wanted to flatten it down to 3 tax brackets, but no deductions. Remember that you will recall, if you're an adult at this point, them floating the ideas of, we're going to cut taxes and lower taxes, but we're going to eliminate the mortgage interest deduction or something like that, which of course he would have nothing. You can't do that. But this was all counter to all Republican theory at the time. And by the way, not even probably terribly popular. It's not like that meant it was popular with Democrats either. I don't know. I'm not sure how they would have reacted to that. Certainly raising income tax on the wealthy might not have been unpopular. But the idea of having, don't worry about it, you won't have to pay it because we're going to have more tax shelters. I don't know. By 1991, we weren't yet in the DLC heyday quite yet. But I don't know. They were ascendant. Maybe they would have backed it. Anyway, Donald Trump's approach to solving this was, let's go back to raising rates and opening loopholes so that we can syndicate, said Stephen M. Rosenthal, a senior fellow at the nonpartisan Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, who worked on the eventual legislation as a congressional aide. Mr. Trump, like his fellow real estate developers, did not get all he sought, but in 1993, Congress made two significant changes. One allowed real estate investors with highly leveraged properties to accept forgiveness of their bank loans without paying taxes on the money in exchange for giving up other tax benefits. Another allowed them to apply some real estate losses against other kinds of income. Exactly how much benefit Mr. Trump could wring from those shifts would have depended on the size of his loans on the one hand and how much of his operating losses flowed from properties that qualified under the new rules. His boat floated along with the rest of the real estate industry when the tide came in, Mr. Kleinbard said. Exactly how many dollars and cents he got, who knows? We don't know because he hasn't disclosed his taxes, of course. But this was all relevant to the debate yesterday and, of course, really throughout the campaign. But in particular, because when we found out that on his 1995 taxes, he didn't pay anything, and he claimed $1 billion in losses and hasn't paid federal income taxes net since then, or perhaps for the last 20 years or so. Then you start to wonder, how did that happen? And the answer is, well, tax loopholes, but ones that he lobbied for, and that even by itself might be okay, except that we forget that Trump's excuse in debate one and then since then, and again reiterated last night, was, well, I was smart. That makes me smart. Why does that make you smart? He keeps saying, I know the tax code better than anybody. And by the way, his accountant quite correctly has been out saying, now, the one who knows the tax code is me. I did all the work. He's very uninterested. He doesn't know anything about it. He signs what I tell him to sign, which maybe is not such a great admission to make if we find out that he was claiming more than he was entitled to. But yeah, the idea that Trump knows the tax law inside and out, I doubt it very much. He's aware that there are such things, although, lobbying for such things does give you a better basis for thinking maybe he really does understand these things better. Although I also don't know that he didn't have people write his testimony and convince him of this is the argument to make. But he might have actually understood that one. But again, the claim in the two debates and in between was, I only took advantage of the system to the extent that allowed me to. This is the system. It is. He says, it's rigged. I know that better than anybody. It's rigged for the rich, and it makes me smart. I'm not going to pay more taxes than I have to just to be nice to people, which is actually, that would be good. I wish you would. Some people view that as patriotism. But I understand for the average taxpayer why you wouldn't pay more than you have to. And that was the big argument afterwards, right? You don't pay more than you have to. Are you being a hypocrite? Well, I'm middle class. I mean, when I pay more than I have to, that really means, hey, I might not be able to get a car. Hey, I might not be able to do these things with my kids. Hey, I might not be able to pay for their college education. With Mr. Trump, I mean, to borrow from The Simpsons, it might mean another ivory back scratcher down the tubes. What's he not going to be able to get, even if he pays enormous taxes? What, more gold shares? No. And anyway, you don't pay for anything anyway. It wasn't going to damage your lifestyle. It's never cash out of pocket for you to get what you want. You just cheat other people out of it and don't pay for it. Or wrangle it. Even that stupid apartment decorating you have, right? I don't know that you didn't pay I don't know that you did. I don't know that you didn't pay the decorators for that. I know that would be a great thing. A lot of people said I wouldn't pay for that crap either, and that's funny and everything. But did he pay for that? Were there suppliers of those gold chairs who were stiffed? I don't think so. I think decorating his penthouse was probably just rolled into the financing of the construction of Trump Tower, and so generally he cheated his contractors across the board. But it was probably the contractor's responsibility to bring that stuff in. And so whatever, maybe they stiffed their suppliers. But anyway, the point is that when Trump says, I just, all I did in claiming $1 billion losses, et cetera, and then setting myself up for 20 tax-free years is I used the system that was presented to me. What am I going to do? Pay extra? Well, okay, like I said, that applies more to middle-class people than to the ultra-wealthy, if you are, in fact, ultra-wealthy, and maybe that's why you feel so bad about it. You're not ultra-wealthy. But that only holds water if you didn't lobby to create the system that you're talking about. You asked them to specially create the loophole that you used and then said, hey, it's not my fault. I'm just using the system that was there for me. So, I mean, that's pretty hypocritical all by itself. There's more to the story. Of course, we will not have time to get to it, but somewhere in here is another article which also likewise notes one of the accusations made last night in the debate, and again, in between the debates, was that, well, Hillary Clinton, you were in the Senate and your husband was president. If you don't like those loopholes, why didn't you get rid of them? And it should be noted that while she was in the Senate, she actually did do some work in helping to generate legislation that did limit things, or would have limited things quite a bit. And then, of course, some other legislation that might have limited things even more, which then got vetoed by President George W. Bush and never came to fruition. And also, of course, while her husband was president, you can't snap your fingers and say, I want this in the tax code. Boom. He had to work in later years, especially with a Republican Congress that would have thought that was anathema to them, and they would never have gone along with it. Anyway, fuller reporting about that exists elsewhere. I'll see if I can't dig that up and either share it with you or at least put it in Scott Anderson's hands, which are normal size hands, by the way. Nothing wrong with those. And he can put them in the afternoon post. And we'll all be educated together. Tomorrow we'll be back. I don't know whether I can wait any longer, really, to get on to this story about the model trafficking, and it might be wise, perhaps, to spend part of tomorrow with pieces I discovered. I don't know whether I should present them to you chronologically in the order in which I discovered them, or whether they make sense as foreshadowing for the big piece to come on Wednesday. I don't know. We're working without a net on this one. You won't believe the way this story developed and how far-reaching it is. But enough about me, I guess, because it's time for it to be about someone entirely different. The After Show, which is not entirely different, by the way. And if you are a fan and listening to us on podcast, I must recommend that you search out the podcast of The After Show. Not only because you will enjoy it immensely, but also because it will help make sense of the last 2 minutes of every single one of my shows, where I tell you what's happening on the After Show, and you say, that sounds great, I can't find it. It's easy enough to find, and they're working on a really super easy URL in the meantime. netrootsradio.com will always bring you to the live broadcast of it, and they're always after us, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, as the case may be. What's coming up today? I will tell you. An Islamic woman who would not shake her male boss's hand, you know about those things, sues for $1 million after he fires her. Deforestation and drug trafficking are driving out Guatemala's indigenous communities, and Nestle announces a nationwide recall of its packaged drumstick ice cream. Oh no, I like those things. I haven't really bought one in a long time, but I like them. The last half, they'll report how campus workers unmasked the scheme to privatize all of Tennessee state property and services, and more. Hold on.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's what's coming up in the last half of the last half. Once you get past the faked entries and bad translations from Russian to English, the WikiLeaks hack of Clinton's speeches are pretty good. Well, if you wanted to hear some news like that and some analysis from a different perspective, hang on for the After Show with Wink and Justice coming up next.